I want to say it's a great honor for me to be here. And I apologize that I'm speaking in English, but my Korean would make you run out of the room. I wanted to say a few things before I get into the start of my comments. And the first is that I want to congratulate all of you for an incredible accomplishment. This is an outstanding institution, 127 years of history. I think an institution that's known for its global standards from day one. This institution has had them, for its creativity and for its leadership. And that's why I'm honored to be here, because I love to learn about leadership. And what I would say is that my best experiences, as I think was being said in the video, where I feel I learned at least as much as I know, which is probably this much, about leadership, was when I was in Korea. That was the vital point when many, many things were changing. Lots of transition around the crisis. No one knew which way things were going to move. It was very dynamic. It was aggressive. But I found that I learned the most in that period of time. And one of the things I'm going to talk about today is that I think you are sitting in front of a period of time which is going to be a historic time in terms of our human history. So again, the first thing is just congratulations to all of you on a wonderful accomplishment. Again, I feel a very deep bond to Korea and actually to Yonsei, not only with Professor Park, who's been a mentor and a friend, but also to other people. Songja, at the time, who was a president here back in the 90s, helped introduce me to Korea when I didn't know how to move around or where I was moving. And if I even look at the missionary background to this place, there also feels that link. So what I wanted to talk about today was three things. The first is to talk a little bit about the history that we're in right now, this context, because I believe that you are going to be leading in a time like we've not seen for hundreds of years. As I said in my remarks, 200 years from now, I think people will look to see what this next 20 years is like, and it'll be an inflection point. The easy thing to say about that is that I won't be around in 200 years, so you can't tell whether I'm right or wrong. But I still like to make that assertion that this is an historic time. And that's going to be a time where it's going to require extraordinary leadership from all of you to be able to take us forward. One of my Chinese clients, when I was talking to him about what he felt this next 20 to 30 years would unfold, what he said to me was, I think that this next century, the century we're in, is going to be a wonderful period of time for humanity if we get through the first half, which is kind of an interesting way to look at it. So why do I say that? There's a number of very major forces that are underway, and fortunately, you in Korea and you here at Yonsei are at the nexus of a lot of those. The first is this shift towards the east and towards Africa and towards South America like we've never seen before. We've never seen the migration of humans ever in our history like we're seeing right now. There are 1 million people a week that are moving from rural areas to cities every week, no matter what. No matter what's happening in Europe, no matter what's happening to oil prices, those people are moving. And that's creating this urbanization, one of the biggest shifts in economic power that we will have ever seen. Roughly 1 billion people entering the middle class. So that's one shift that's going on. The second is actually around an aging population. And again, Korea is in the midst of that. You're young, but we have an aging population. And if you look just at Asia, there used to be 10 workers for every retiree in the year 2000 in Asia. In 2050, there'll be 3 workers for every retiree. That's going to create a lot of challenges for us. It's going to create a lot of issues on healthcare. It's going to create a lot of issues on young versus old, working versus non-working. And you will have to deal with that. Our future, my future, depends on you dealing with that as we go ahead. So the demographic shifts are there. The third is around technology. We are seeing just a dramatic change in technology. And again, you here in Korea are at the center of it. But most of the CEOs that I talk to, and I have a habit, I want to see 2 CEOs a day to keep externally oriented. So I've seen about 1,200 of them in the last little while. And when they talk about technology, what they say is technology is moving 3 times faster than management. It's very difficult to keep up. The disruptions that are going on are significant. Today, there are 5 billion people that have cell phones. You know, Facebook would be the 3rd largest nation on Earth. There are 35 billion objects that are connected by the internet. Brian Arthur, who is a futurist from the Santa Fe Institute, is saying that the machine-to-machine economy, machines talking to each other. If you're going into check into the airport, those machines that tell the people that you've actually checked in and do the weighing of the aircraft and so forth, that economy will become bigger than our economy that we have today in about 2040. So the world is changing dramatically on the technology front. We're also seeing a lot of strains on resources, oil, commodities like copper, but even water. It's our estimate that in the year 2030, there will be 40% more demand for water than there is supply. And that's a pretty dangerous thing to have happen. I actually think a lot of wars are created and caused because of water. I think a lot of the issues in Tibet and in the Himalayas are more to do with water than anything else. And if you think about Turkey making dams so that the Iraqis can have it and the Vietnamese being concerned about the Chinese damming some of the rivers, there's going to be a big issue to deal with. Food will be a major issue. I personally think that the agri-food business will be one of the single biggest businesses in the world, and it requires technology. And I think, again, there's wonderful opportunities for you in building businesses, in organizations around that. And the final area is on government. I think most governments around the world, including the Chinese government, are highly strained by all of the requirements they have. And one of the biggest issues of our time today is actually rising inequality. The people that lose out from globalization and all of the technological change that's going on. And that's becoming a very big counterforce to capitalism. Today, right now in Spain, 42% of the youth don't have jobs. And that's just unacceptable. It's unacceptable for all of us, and we can't rely on business to fix that, or government to fix it. We need to, and business help. If we don't help deal with that, we're going to have a major crisis. And we've seen what happens in North Africa. So I hope that gives you a bit of a picture of the world that you are living in is going to be one of the most, if not the most dynamic that we've seen in 200 years. Huge changes. I'm excited. I'm actually jealous. I'm jealous. I wish I were you, because I think there's going to be amazing opportunities for you to go after. But I also think it's going to be a volatile time. And I think how you lead will be different than how we have led or how leaders today are leading. And I just wanted to outline a few of those areas. The first, in terms of what it is that people do, I found that many of the clients that we're working with, the CEOs, for example, or ministers of finance, are having to operate having a very short-term lens and a very long-term lens, a telescope and a microscope. And I remember the Minister of Finance telling me this in Canada, Jim Flaherty. He said, when I saw him, I said, "How are you doing?" And I said, "I have a headache." And I said, "We'll take an aspirin. What's your problem?" He said, "No, I've got this microscope here and a telescope, and it's very hard." And I said, "Why?" He said, "The reason is because I'm in a minority government which could be kicked out in 6 weeks. So I have to manage the short term. But I'm also the Minister of Finance, so I have to think about the long-term health of the country. You have to do both together. If you're a CEO today, you have to be very worried about short-term fluctuations because your supply chains may get cut because of an earthquake or because of a crisis in some part of the world. But you also have to be thinking long-term about where your business is going. So being good at both at the same time is going to be very important. The second is being ready for these big trend breaks, because most industries are going to shift. And I'll tell you one story where I met with the previous CEO of Nokia, okay? And then I met 4 weeks later with the new CEO of Nokia. And when I met with that CEO of Nokia, what he said was, 2 years ago, our only competitors that we used to think about were Samsung and Motorola and a few Japanese players. Google and Apple were not even on our list of the competitors. And by the way, you and McKinsey, I don't think, had predicted that that would be the case either, right? And then what you see is that 3 years later, it's a dramatically different set of competitors that are there. And so many organizations are looking for views from different industries to make sure that they are fresh in how they're thinking. If you're in the oil and gas industry, even though in many ways it's the booming period, oil prices are at very high levels, the demands are actually there are lots of threats to the business system in terms of where money is going to be made or not. What happens with electric cars, what happens with dealerships, what happens with pipelines. There's all sorts of different issues. So you need to be thinking about that at all times. The third area which we think is going to be different, and it's something that I think, again, Korea does naturally, is around being what I call a tri-sector athlete. You have to be good at private sector, public sector, and social sector, no matter what leader you want to be. If you want to be a social entrepreneur, if you don't understand how the private sector works or the public sector works, you won't be successful. If you're a private sector leader, the same is the case, and if you're a government leader. So we have to think about a career where we get experience in these different areas, because that's the future. Issues are no longer business issues or government issues or social sector issues. They're all of our issues that we have to play a role in trying to help move forward. And the final area I'd call is being a receptor and a connector. And this is the notion of keeping in touch with where things are going. For example, it used to be the case when I moved from Korea to Shanghai. And when I was in Shanghai, there were many board meetings, all US companies, European companies. It was like tourism. The boards would come, they wanted to see what was going on in China. Where the tourists are going now, those board tourists, they're going to Silicon Valley and they're going to Israel, because they're trying to see how the world's changing from a technology point of view. Some are coming to Korea, because this is also a place which is leading edge in terms of how consumers are using the new technology and where it is. So making sure that you're aware, and that's why, for example, I travel basically 90% of the time, not because I like to travel, because if I'm not aware or in touch with what's going on, I can't be effective at what I do. And I would argue that most of the clients that I'm working with now that are global, when I ask them, where do you live, they give me a strange look. I remember Tom Albanese at Rio Tinto. I saw him in China. I said, where do you live? And he got mad. He said, what point is that question? And I said, well, I just like to know where you keep your clothes, or where. And he said, I live in 5 countries. And I'm not suggesting this is a good lifestyle or anything like. I'm just telling you, in all of our ways, we have to be connected to what's happening in the different parts of the world. And that means being connected with your customer at the front line. Many of my favorite consumer and banking clients force their executives to spend at least 2 hours a month listening to the complaint calls from customers, or actually being in the store to see what's actually happening. So those are some of the changes I think that leaders are going to have to focus on as they go ahead. What I think is most important, and something that I'm just beginning to realize, is that it's actually character which is going to matter the most. It's not how well you did in school. It's not what mark you got. It's not even what jobs you take. It's your character, which we think is going to mean the most. And what I mean by that is the following things. One is what we call having a strong sense of purpose. It's a moral code. It doesn't mean you have to be religious, but it means you have to have a moral code, a direction of where you're going, because there are so many decisions and issues coming in front. You don't have time to be able to analyze everything in detail. And the people you work with need to know that you are going to keep stay the course as you drive forward in what you're doing. I think the second aspect about leadership and character is being calm when the storm comes in. And unfortunately, there's going to be many more storms. So I talked to Carlos Ghosn, who's at Nissan Renault, and he basically told me that he thinks the number of external incidents affecting companies is going to go up 2 times in the next 10 years. So you just have to be used to it. But if you panic when something like that happens, then the organization panics. And so what people have learned to do is to what's called compartmentalize things, to take those issues and put them into your system. And one example I'd give you is I was meeting with the CEO of a very large insurance company, and he said to me, I always ask questions, what would you have done differently now if you could do it over again? And he said to me, well, when I would first meet someone like you, I used to think, and my lawyer would come in and say, we've been sued for $6 billion. And he said, when that happens, I would be panic-stricken. If I was meeting with you, I'd kick you out of my office, and I would be focused. He goes, now I've got 6 of those going on at once. And interestingly, I think a place that learns and teaches people how to compartmentalize things is West Point. What they do with some of the young Army captains is they'll say, here's an engineering problem. It'll take you 30 minutes to figure out how to build a bridge from X to Y. But you have to come up with a solution while you're crawling under barbed wire with live machine gun firing. And then by the time you get to the other side, you figure it out. Because it forces you to keep thinking while turbulence is going on. I'm not suggesting that at Yonsei we put in a program like that for you, but I do think we need to think about the challenges that you face and how you keep direction. I think a third element is just transparency. There is no more difference anymore between a public life and a private life. Technology has got rid of that. You can't fool people. You have to be authentic, because whatever you say is people are going to know if you said something different, and they're going to scrutinize it. And I think you're going to live even in more of a world like that. I go, thank God there wasn't Facebook when I was growing up, because I wouldn't want some of those things coming up on the video. But the point is, I think being prepared to deal in a very transparent world is going to be critical. And the final comment I just wanted to make on the character is this notion of it's a marathon and a sprint, your energy, fitness, brain fitness. Because what happens is that as we enter a more and more challenging world where you're going to see all sorts of these shifts going on, but you have to keep your energy up, most leaders now don't focus on time management, they focus on energy management. The amount of advisors now going to leaders on fitness and on nutrition and how to rest, it's amazing. It's athleticism, if you will. And that's something just to think about as you look ahead, how you manage your energy to be able to deal with the shifts. So the final thing, I've been talking for too long, I want to say is I just had a few wishes I wanted to pass on to you. The first is dream big. I think one of the things I've always felt is it's very important to have high ambition. It's not arrogant. Have a high ambition. So whatever you're dreaming, make sure it's as big as it possibly can be, because most people, when they finish their career, don't think that their dream was too small. You've got to broaden it in terms of what you're doing. The second thing I would say is be a risk taker. We've found in work we've done on leadership in McKinsey, more successful people versus less successful people in the same cohort, the more successful people have more bad luck than the less successful people. It's a bit different than what you'd think. So take risk. It's important. It actually is important to fail. I think one of the comments up there, I had many failures when I was at McKinsey, which were deeply disturbing and embarrassing and so forth. But the thing is, that's where you learn resilience, because that's life. You're going to have lots of failures and challenges. And my argument is if you don't have failures, you're not leading. You've got to push it. So think about that side. The last comment I just wanted, or 2 comments maybe I want to make, is I had on here is be an interesting person. And I'm going to just finish this with a story. and this is about not being a boring workaholic, which a lot of people like me are at McKinsey. We just work hard and so forth. That's not going to be, you're not going to be very successful that way. And the story I just want to tell you is when I was actually in Korea here working, and I was working also in Singapore. We were helping the Singaporean government build their financial center. And on one of the big progress reviews days, I invited one of my mentors from California, big, fat guy, a huge guy, very smart guy, and I was meeting him in the lobby, and our meeting was at 8 o'clock, and it was 7:30, and he was wearing a big red Hawaiian shirt, almost like a light switch on it. You could turn it off, this big red shirt. And I said, Ted, it's time to get your shirt on. We got to go. And he said, this is my shirt. And I said, you can't wear a shirt like this to the Singaporeans. They're not going to like that. And he said, you have a choice, Dominic. I can wear the shirt or no shirt. You pick. I said, okay, how about we go with the shirt? And so we go right into the taxi cab, and he was a big guy in those little Singaporean taxis. So I was huddled in the corner, and I said, where's the document? Where's the paper? And he said, I don't have a document. And I said,